What are the structures that create sort of that extra challenge in a workplace environment for like neurodiverse people? How do we shift those barriers or those perceived barriers to make or to enable neurodiverse people to feel more comfortable being in those environments?
I think one of the things is so much of the workplace is about sort of quite soft skills that aren't always obvious, especially to people with ADHD or autism. There's two jobs, they're exactly the same jobs that have come up quite recently, but the applications were slightly different. And one just said something along the lines of, with regard to the job spec, how do your skills, match up, essentially. Very broad, single question, big blank sheet of paper for you to fill in. And the other one asked much more specific questions, looking at our output in this area, how could we change this to achieve this, that sort of thing. With that was great because I could really, sort of go drill down into that, give a very thorough answer and show, all my expertise in this area. This great big broad wide open question is so much more difficult. I look at that and I just struggle immediately. It's like, how much do they want me to say? What do I need to cover? Do I need to say everything? Do I need to just pick out certain things and go really deep on that? And that for me just creates a kind of a stall, and I end up sort of dithering, and eventually I'll do it and I'll sort of put something together and it's hope, now it's the same job, but if if someone was to look at my two applications, I think they'd get a very different idea of who I was from these two, these just, and it's just the approach of, of how they've asked the questions. It was interesting what you're saying about working memory, different types of memory. My memory of, I think you said episodic kind of things that have happened, that classic interview question of think of a time when. I know I can do it. I know I'm great at that, but tell me a time. Oh God. I'll think if I'd been asked it in advance, not a problem. I can really, have a conversation with someone. They can help me pull those things out. But there in an interview room, no. Is that something I have to do in my job? Do I have to, in my job, think of a time when something happened? Never. But that's how it's tested in an interview, things like that,
Jasmine, when thinking of recruitment, again, same situation, there's some neurodivergent people. The interview model just, doesn't align, right? So sort of take me through your view of the way that should be approached.
Yeah, I think Dan just touched on it as well. And what you were saying before about leaders having the courage to let people be who they are. I think leaders also need to be courageous in doing things non-traditionally. So if we're thinking about the interview model, being put on the spot in that way for something that's not necessarily going to be required of you in your role day to day, it means that you're not really assessing the skills that are necessary for someone to do their job well. So if I were you to use the example of a software engineer, for example, let's say a software engineer who is autistic, and if we are thinking of stereotypes, that perhaps the way in which they pick up on social nuances or social cues or do they not adhere to the expected social norms in a workplace? If you are judging someone's capabilities in an interview to be able to communicate those things, and do they fit in? So we also need to acknowledge that people in interviews often succumb to similarity bias and affinity biases as well. So how much is this person like me? Or how much is this person like all of these other people that I've hired in this role? You're really not going to diversify your talent pipeline. So instead of basing your assumptions or how you're grading someone's competency based on social skills, can you provide them with tasks that are relevant to what they will be doing when they are in the job? And I think people are often hesitant to do this because it requires a redesign and a restructure, or it might be increased time and effort and money. But actually, you're more likely to hire the right people for the job You'll diversify your talent pipeline, and you'll probably save money in the long run by having to go through recruitment processes over and over again if you hire someone that actually wasn't the best fit for the role. You know, whether this is for those who are autistic, have ADHD, or any type of neurodivergency, by having an understanding, even in your application process, if they feel comfortable sharing this, and I intentionally don't use the word disclose there because I think there's a lot around inclusive language that we need to talk about too, but if you have an understanding of how someone's, whether they are autistic, how that manifests for them in the workplace, you'll have a better idea of how you can really assess their skills in an equitable way, rather than judging them against, you know, other candidates or a skill set that actually isn't really measuring what they need to do.
And have you got anything to add to that, Angela, in the way in which you recruit?
I agree with everything that's been said. The first if I was to talk to companies, which I often do because I've become quite a speaker on this topic, and they often ask, where do we start? I think the very first thing is when you write your job description, make sure you are writing something that is actually what you need. You know, if you're saying we need a great team player, and that person is actually going to be working, you know, as a data analyst and really not have to work in a team at all, are you asking for the right things? And I think that is the first and fundamental thing that you can do to get it right, is make sure it's actually what you need. And then test for that. And exactly what you're talking about, the assessment centers. You know, if you're wanting somebody to be really creative in your organization and you want somebody that's a brilliant visual designer, and then you throw out their CV because they made typos in it, like, you're not assessing for the right thing. So yeah, I think if we could just really start with just asking for what we actually need of the job, that would be a really good start.